Stories. Across time and space, stories live on. Through words whispered over a crackling fire to figures on a stage moving with exaggerated grace, and even then, to pixels on a screen, weaving binary tales of adventure and woe. This particular story is one set in the future. Is it our future? Maybe, maybe not, but a future nonetheless.
This is the opening scene of a tabletop role-playing game occurring during a meeting of Adventurers Wanted. Adventurers Wanted is ASU's club for lovers of TTRPGs, including the most well-known Dungeons & Dragons. I sat down with 3 members of the club's leadership team to find out what exactly this club was and what it meant to them.
Hi, my name is Sycamore. I am the founder and club president of the D&D club at ASU.
So, as a founding member, what drew you to build the club?
I wanted to play D&D. I looked at ASU for a D&D club. I didn't find one, so I made one.
Had you played D&D before this?
I had not actually played D&D before. I had watched D&D, specifically Acquisitions Incorporated, and other than that, I had no interaction with D&D before.
So how did you do the club as someone who had never done it before?
So luckily I was able to find 2 other people who had played D&D and who seemed at least familiar with it, and they kind of taught me as we went along, and I taught other people, which was kind of weird because I was teaching people at the same time. But it's an easier system than you would first think to learn, so it didn't take too much.
So a lot of people when they first start out think of it as a really complicated thing with lots of rules and lots of numbers and math.
There are lots, quote unquote, lots of rules and lots of numbers. It really depends on your play style and the people that you're around, how complicated it is. Because some of the rules you can really rules lawyer and just be specific and say, no, it says this. And other times you can just kind of go with what the spirit of what you want to do. The only really difficult part is in the beginning. There are some number crunching you need to do, but it's not that much and it's not too difficult, I found.
So as someone who had never played before, what did you find difficult about it?
There's just a lot in the beginning because there's races and there's classes and then there's spells and then there's abilities and there's items and there's just so much that you're like, I don't even know where to begin. But as long as you just take a step back and you kind of focus on how you want to play, I found it's easier to figure out what you want to do and how you want to play it before you even start. Because if you like playing, I don't know, in video games, if you're the Panther stealth kind of person who, no, there's no one to raise the alarm if everyone's dead, then you go with the stealth and attack characters like the rogue. But if you like manipulating people, then you should pick like a wizard or someone who has spells to cast things that change how people see the world.
So what is your play style?
My play style is the Panther stealth, where like there's no one to raise the alarm if no one's there to raise the alarm. Though I've kind of toned that down because it's not always fun with other people around. It's kind of more fun when you're by yourself. So I kind of changed my play style to how people are playing. As I've become more adept in playing D&D, I found that's the best, just to kind of go with the flow.
Do you feel like it's a more individual or a group experience?
There are, so the best D&D groups are both, where there is a group task that you're trying to do and you're all working together, but there are subsections of like, so I have this agenda and this is how I play. So if we're interrogating someone, I will cast spells on them. And that's your agenda and that's how you do it. But as a group, you are going to one goal. So the best groups there are both aspects.
So what excites you about D&D? Why do you keep playing it?
Just because you never know what's going to happen. Like last time I played D&D, I prepared a whole one shot with monsters and puzzles, and the first encounter took over an hour just because people they weren't, instead of fighting, they were trying different things, which was cool. It threw off my game and I had to plan for whole new things. It's just, you never know what to expect. Even if you've planned for everything, there's something you have not planned for.
So you run games as well as play in them?
I mostly run games.
Why?
Because there's not enough people to run games. Since I've really created the club, I have mostly ran games just because there's always a shortage of people running because everyone wants to play. Sometimes people are kind of nervous to run games because it is a lot. There is a lot of things you need to do. You need to prepare. You need to know the vast majority of the rules just because especially when you get new players, they don't understand and you need to be there for them. But I find it's probably the most rewarding, and I enjoy it more than playing, because not only do you get to kind of manipulate of what's going on and you can make sure that you are enjoying yourself, but it's also just like when a chef makes something, they like seeing that people enjoy his food. You enjoy watching people enjoy your session and being like, whoa, that cool factor. When you pull out this monster or you pull out this puzzle, they're like, whoa, how are we going to defeat this? And then they do, and they're just ecstatic and they're high-fiving it, and it's a good feeling.
As someone who prefers to run a game, what do you have to do to prepare to do that?
So there's different kinds of games that you can prepare. There's one shots, which are like 4-hour sessions of just one time you make a character, and then after that it's done. And then there's campaigns, and campaigns take a lot more because they can go on for theoretically infinite amount of time because you can just keep going and going. But the best thing is what you should prepare for anything is, what is your end goal? What do you want the players to do, or what do you want them to achieve? Do you want them to save a village? Do you want them to find a mysterious artifact? And then build from there, because once you have the end in mind, it's a lot easier to figure out the path from beginning to end rather than starting at the beginning and just kind of wandering.
Why do you think people like D&D so much?
I think they like D&D because, as I've said before, that anything can happen. You never know how people will see a puzzle and interpret it differently and find a solution you never thought of, or things can happen. People will suggest, why don't we do this? And you have to now think of how that's going to happen because you hadn't prepared for it.
So for you, it's about kind of the chaos of it.
The ordered chaos of it, where anything can happen, but ultimately there is a path that people are following, and they might see a shortcut that you didn't think about, but you are still going on the same path. It's just how you get from point A to B.
Being a senior and this being your last year kind of involved with the club, what do you hope to see as it progresses?
I mean, I hope that I can come back and just see the club has grown even more. Because in the first year I had it, there was like, I don't know, 10 people would show up to a meeting. And now we have an average of 35 or more people show up. And so I hope to come back and maintain that or even grow more. And that's really what I wanted, just for people to be able to enjoy D&D at ASU.
I also spoke to Zach Nichol, one of the other members of Adventurers Wanted's leadership team.
So I'm Zach Nichol, currently the junior president of the D&D club. Next year I'll be the president, and I'm a sophomore here at ASU.
So what drew you to the club specifically?
So freshman year, I lived on campus, and I had almost no friends with me. So I was just sort of reaching out and getting into any club that I sort of had an interest in, just trying to meet people. And after Passport, I didn't see the club because they were in a completely different building. But someone gave me the bright idea to just Google ASU Dungeons and Dragons Club, and then it came up. It was the first one. So I came to the first meeting, and I've been coming to every one since.
So what drew you to D&D in the first place?
I had a friend who liked D&D in like middle school, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got together and made characters and played like a session, and then didn't touch it for 2 years. And then I've had like a renaissance of it over the past like year, where I got back into it with my old group of friends, and I've been doing it on campus a lot more. I just sort of like it because it's really like free form. You know, like I'm really into video games, and I like that. So the idea of being like a video game character, but you can do whatever you want, is A-okay in my book.
So do you play more, or are you a dungeon master?
I DM more than I play now. I used to just play, and now it feels like I DM every single time I play, which isn't a bad thing because I do like to DM.
What part of DMing do you like?
So I'm a writer, so definitely what I like more is like the world building, making characters, you know, giving them motivations, coming with a plot, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you find that your play style is a little more like narrative heavy?
yes, definitely. I am like an advocate for player choice, which is why I don't tend to do like cinematics in it where you like take control of the characters and have them do a specific thing. But I like to skip over a lot of minutia that sort of goes on with like a screen wipe or like a hand wave of like, oh, this so and so happens, and now what do you do?
Spinning
That sort of
Batmobile
stuff.
logo.
Yeah, like that.
Why do you like that part more?
I guess it is really just because I like to write. I like to write fiction. So I like making the story, and having the story play out is good. And I feel like when you get down to like every single decision has to be made of like, oh, like you just woke up. What do you do? Oh, okay, cool. After that, what do you do? Like having to ask a question every single time of like, what do they do? I feel like that just sort of slows down the gameplay almost. Whereas like if you do more narrative, you can get to the big fun stuff sooner.
What's the big fun stuff to you?
For me, it's either, depending on the system, it's either combat or like character moments. So D&D, it tends to be more combat because it's kind of, how do you say, it's sort of like designed for the combat more. So you don't get as many character moments. You still get character moments, obviously. But the system is designed more for combat. That's what a lot of people like. And so it sort of becomes something of like, there are some people, not naming any people in particular, who sort of know the system too much and then make it almost impossible to throw a challenge against them in combat, not naming any names. But whereas other systems like I run the Star Wars system, Edge of the Empire, or Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny, it's 3 names for the same system. And that has a lot more ways you can do out of combat things. There's like 10 times as many skills, and you only use like 5 of them in combat. So there's just so much other things you can do outside of combat in that sort of system, where it becomes like less important, and what's more important is the story.
So for the club, you guys don't just play Dungeons and Dragons then?
No, so we call it Other Systems Night, which is when we just sort of open the floodgates and anybody can play whatever they bring and whatever somebody wants to run. This year we started doing it where we meet every Friday, we do D&D one Friday, and then the next week we do Other Systems Night, and then D&D the next Friday and Other Systems Night, so we alternate between it. Because last year when I first joined, I think there was 1 Other Systems Night per semester, but now it's every other meeting. So you definitely get to play other systems a lot more. And it's easier to learn a system when you play it with someone who knows how to play it pretty well.
Give me some examples of some of the other systems for somebody who might not know anything about what that looks like.
So there's the Star Wars system, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny. It's all the same. There's Numenera is one, which is about like, I think it's like a post-apocalyptic Earth where now there's magical artifacts that are coming about, where you do things with those magic artifacts. There's Call of Cthulhu, I think is what it's called, which uses the Cthulhu mythos. Shadowrun, which is like cyberpunk with magic, which is really cool, really hard, but really cool. And there's Cyberpunk, which is just cyberpunk.
So it seems like there's kind of a genre for anyone.
Yeah, and you can always make your own. In every single system, you can really boil it down to work in any setting. You just take the defining characteristic of the system and you can do it in another setting. Like Dungeons and Dragons, the defining thing is that you have modifiers to your skills. You roll a d20, add your modifier, compare that to a number. If you're higher, you succeed. If you're lower, you fail. And that could really work in almost any setting. There is a Star Wars system that is based off the Dungeons and Dragons system with the d20. It's not as good as Edge of the Empire, which has its completely own set of dice that you use, where you make like a pool and you roll it and it cancels out. That one is really good for basically any setting because the only stuff that really ties it to Star Wars is the flavor text of like, oh, like you have a lightsaber, it's not just a sword, or you have a vibro sword, it's not just a sword, or you have a blaster instead of a gun, or you could just change it. It's a little more work on the DM to take a system and use it in its own setting or in a different setting than it's made for, but a lot of the times it can be pretty worth it.
Why is it worth it?
So some systems can sort of get bogged down in their setting, because Dungeons and Dragons seems like it's limited to like high fantasy with a lot of magic and monsters and everything, but you can make it work in a different system. Something like Shadowrun you wouldn't want to do because it's way too complicated, and the flavor text makes it easier.
So it seems like you're only limited by your own creativity then.
Yeah, exactly.
Being part of this club, you're a sophomore, but you said you're going to be president next year. What do you hope to see the club become?
So I definitely want it to grow a lot more. I want it to almost do more advertising because we don't really like do flyers or big announcements outside of our little echo chamber. But more members is always good. So I think we have a pretty good system right now that we're working with where we just need to expand it and make it work for more and more people. Would also like it if we did more bigger events because we have done something the past 2 years where we collaborate with the AZ Game Fair, which is in March, I think, and we do like an event there, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty awesome. So like more events, more than just getting together and playing D&D.
As someone who came in kind of looking for other people to like play this with and, you know, share what you're interested in, what value have you found as being part of this club?
Well, it's definitely where I've made the most friends. It's like, honestly, it's like the highlight of my week almost. Definitely freshman year, like I got up in the morning on Monday because I knew I was going to have D&D on Friday. So for me personally, it gave me something to look forward to every single week, which is good for me. And it's where I made most of my friends on campus, actually almost all my friends on campus.
Okay, your turn. Tell me one of your favorite tabletop RPG stories.
Probably when I ran a Star Wars session, the players just decided to go do a street race with like speeders, and I had no idea how to do that because I had no plan to do that session. So we had a little break, and I found rules for it, and then we did it. And this whole time, we're just like having fun and like almost making fun of it because I gave one of the enemy racers just a random name. I call him like Luigi or something, which is the name of a character from the Cars movies, the little forklift guy. So we did it on like an online thing. So we had like pictures for each of the speeders as they went around a map. And so Luigi's was the little forklift thing. And then he, of course, met a very tragic end.
As most NPCs seem to end up.
Yeah, and so now there's just in our Discord server, there is just like in memoriam Luigi, and it's the little forklift guy from Cars.
Finally, I spoke to a third member of the club's leadership team.
Hi, my name is Josh, last name Elkins. I'm another junior officer. My role is a little vague in the description. You know, most people have like there's a president, then there's a treasurer, and then then there's my role, which is kind of like a weird mixture between like public representation and like recruitment. But basically, it boils down to just like making sure the meetings run as they should.
What drew you to your tabletop RPG club?
So there's a saga. It's a long saga, but I'm going to give you the condensed version of it. Basically, I started playing when I was like 7, and I started like DMing when I was like 13 or 14. So this has been a huge part of my life for just a very long time. So I'm really passionate about it. And by passionate about it, I mean I'm not a fanatic about it. There's a little bit of zealotry mixed in there. But when I got to campus, my first objective was to sit down and get my classes together. My second objective was to go play D&D on campus. So I found it while on my way to the engineering camp. I sat next to some guy I've never met before in my life. I turned to him and said, "You smell like you play D&D." And he just looks at me, "How did you know?" And that's how I've made my first friend on campus, and also how I found out that there was a D&D club on campus in the first place.
You've been doing this for a really long time. Do you remember what drew you to D&D in the first place?
Like Zach, I'm also a writer. And I have a very active imagination, and it's very robust in the fact that it never stops and it like torments me endlessly. Like my first video game experience was like Red Faction 2. Mm-hmm. So obviously, when you're 6, playing Red Faction not exactly your best bet, but you know how it is. From that moment on, I've been immersed in the video game industry and the worlds crafted by it. I'm enamored by fantasy. I've been that way since I was very young. So when I found out that there was just another way to experience that fantasy and that fiction, I was basically hooked from the beginning.
Why do you keep playing it?
My favorite part is definitely the look of terror on my players' faces when I throw something at them that's not in any book, and they look at me with this absolute ghost face of like, what do we do now? The world's coming to an end. And I just get to look at them and shrug and tell them to figure it out.
So you're a DM then.
Through and through, thoroughbred.
Why do you DM?
There's a couple of reasons, I guess. The first one is I like being in control. I like having that power to shape the narrative and be able to tell my players, this is what's in front of you, figure it out, or these are the pieces you have, what do you do with them? I like watching my players think. I like watching them problem solve. It's a joy for me to deliver an experience more so than play.
So what kind of games do you like to run? What kind of stories do you like to tell?
I like nitty gritty, dark, heavy rules. I'm a little bit different from the other few people who we've had so far. They've taken a couple of jabs at me already throughout this experience. I had to sit there and listen to them, but I am the person who sits there and rules lawyer. I am the person who likes to create a dark world where I'm like, your character is infested with 3 diseases. You're not going to get to town for another 8 days. And also, you're surrounded by undead, and then I get to describe those undead as the festering sacks of flesh that they are. It really puts players in the world, and I like to see them not just play a character, but become their character in that instance.
The becoming of your character, why do you think people like that?
Well, it breaks down to basic, like, everyone has their way of escaping reality. If you like watching TV, you get immersed in like TV shows or like game shows. You might like read or maybe you write stories. We all have our way to escape. I find that making your player not just play a character but become a character helps fully facilitate the act of escaping reality, because that's why we're all playing. We're not really playing so that we can go sit down at our desk job and cringe at the fact that our boss has just yelled at us for the 18th time. We're playing so that we can go be someone else and do some fantastical things, or be a grizzled veteran or a whimsical bard or something like that. We're playing to escape.
Tell me one of your favorite tabletop RPG stories.
All right, so I've been at this for a while, so it's hard for me to pick, but I think one of my favorite stories as a player definitely had to be playing one of the weirder systems. It was a Warhammer system. It was Warhammer 40K. It was, what was it? It was like one of the first ones they ever made, and I was playing with my older brother and a couple people that we had met, and we were gathered around the table, and I was playing this hulking behemoth of a woman who lived on a planet with 3 suns. The sun never set, and she was basically this Amazonian behemoth. And she was trying to integrate herself with a tech society where she had grown up killing things with sticks. So it was wild. So we're in this weird base, surrounded by a bunch of like orcs, which are these gross fungus creatures who are just war-born society, and trying to like get through the tech as this character has no idea how to do it, and just taking the most brute force solutions. Door doesn't open, smash the panel. Thing is in my way, tear it in half, get through it. Door won't open, punch a hole in the door. The doors are made of steel, but it doesn't matter. It's and trying to explain this character to everyone else who were very tech-heavy characters. You're like, oh, I'm going to use these guns, and I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to smart my way through the situation. And then thinking, why would I smart through the situation? Why don't I just break the door down?
What kind of impact do you think D&D can have on people?
As most basic form, you can have it just be like a fun part of your day, stress relief. At a more extreme form, it could literally save lives. It sounds extreme, but if I didn't have it in my life, I might not be here right now. I suffer from a lot of crippling mental things, so like for me, it's beyond just escaping. It's part of something that helps me function in day-to-day reality. Being able to express the stranger sides of things in a safe environment where people aren't going to judge you, and then being able to come back to reality and focus on the hard task at hand is it means a lot. And for a lot of people, it's where they have all their friends. It's where they've made social groups connected. It's where people who never thought that they'd find what they're looking for have found a home.
For the State Press, I'm Kate Orta.